You are listening to Real Life and Other Fantasies, a podcast by engaging storytellers for engaged story listeners. Here's your host, author and journalist, Melvin E. Edwards.
Hello, fellow storytellers, and welcome to this edition of Real Life and Other Fantasies. In this episode, I'm pleased to be joined by a friend who has some thought-provoking stories to share with us today. I'm inviting all of you to act like a fly on the wall and listen to a conversation you probably never thought you needed to hear. It's important because it can save lives. Darrin Evans, welcome to the Real Life and Other Fantasies podcast. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I've really been looking forward to this.
Yeah, so have I. Thanks for being here. So Darrin Evans was born in Fort Dix, New Jersey, and raised in rural North Carolina. If North Carolina vinegar-based barbecue sauce could talk, it would probably sound like Darrin. He has worked as a ditch digger, dishwasher, a short order cook, a soldier, a bouncer, and a teacher. He has an undergraduate degree in history and a master's degree in instructional technology. He's the director of the North Carolina Virtual Learning Community and Professional Development Center and an accessibility technologist. He has made presentations nationally on digital accessibility. In his spare time, Darrin enjoys swimming and judo. His bucket list item is to swim the Dakar Gori Marathon swim in Senegal, West Africa. So Darrin, in this conversation, we'll be talking about several subjects, but mostly about swimming and water safety as we're nearing the Labor Day weekend. That's probably not a topic that seems like that big of a deal to a lot of people, but when you talk about 3,500 annual drownings, it's a big deal. And when we talk about the reasons behind many of those drownings, it's an even bigger deal. One of the things that many Americans don't realize is that Jim Crow segregation had many tentacles, and several of the longest reaching ones still impact children to this day when it comes to water safety. Can you tell us about why your dad insisted that you and your siblings take swimming seriously?
Well, my dad was a drill sergeant in the Army, and he was a very strict guy. And he saw swimming as a survival skill. So he would say it all the time, you kids are going to learn to swim. It's a survival skill. So he was not really into sports, but he was very emphatic that the two things I'm going to make all of y'all do is you're going to have to take some sort of martial art and you're going to have to learn to swim because every person should be able to swim and defend themselves. So that was his major thing. And interestingly enough, he swam almost every day of his life, but he never set foot in a public pool in his lifetime at all, not once. He taught himself how to swim at the Neuse River in Dudley, North Carolina. He had never, of course, he grew up during Jim Crow, so he was never allowed to go in a public pool. So he never went to a YMCA, a public pool, anywhere. Anytime he swam, it was on a military base somewhere.
Wow. And so he passed that skill, at least the interest in the skill along to you.
Yeah, well, we didn't have much of a choice. It was, it was just one of those things you had to do. And again, he knew drowning statistics backwards and forwards. And one of the interesting things that he used to say that I thought was, he just made that up. Turns out it's true that 50% of people that drown never intended on being in the water at all. They were at a lake, they were at a river, they were having a cookout, they slipped, they fell, somebody challenged them to something and they got in, they got taken by an undertow. So I thought that was just sort of a real life fantasy in a sense, but it turns out that that's a reliable statistic worldwide, actually. So I thought that was a fascinating thing. And,
wow.
He just believed you should be able to swim, right? It's just the Earth's 70% water. You're eventually going to find yourself in water, around water, and you need to be able to survive.
All right, a slightly different question here. Do you think the 2007 Terrence Howard movie about the Black Philadelphia swim team was a novelty hit because of the perception that Black people can't be good swimmers?
Well, it was a good movie, and Jim Ellison's got a great story. And I always struggle with this question or this kind of line of thought because, in a sense, one of my favorite writers, besides you, is Toni Morrison, and she's got a quote that just I think it fits here, and it's the very real purpose of racism is distraction. It's to distract you from your work because you're constantly having to describe or detail or explain your reason for being. There is a stereotype that Black people don't swim, but it would be like me taking tennis equipment from you, right? Saying, Melvin, you never can have a racket or a ball or a net. And then, 2 years later, I come and go, why can't Melvin play tennis?
Right.
I don't get it. I mean, those Texans don't play tennis. None of them, right? So I think one story that'll illustrate the point I'm trying to make is it's Kwame Lillard and Matthew Walker. So Kwame Lillard and Matthew Walker were two young men lived in Tennessee. They lived in Nashville. Kwame had just gotten out of Fisk University, an historically Black college in Nashville. And he didn't have a job, so he was working with the Freedom Riders. So before people went to Mississippi, they would stop in Nashville, and he would sort of alert them to the mores of Southern culture in the 60s. So one hot summer day, he was with his friend Matthew Walker, and he said, it's hot. Why don't we go swimming? And Matthew said, sure, yeah, we'll just go swimming. So they go to Centennial Park in Nashville, which was, of course, this is during Jim Crow. It's 1961. They're vigorously escorted out of the pool. And 3 days later, the city of Nashville closes all municipal pools. Every last one of them. Wow. And even today in Centennial Park, where that pool was, is now the Centennial Art Center. So they drained the pool, they filled it with concrete, and they built an art center on top of it. The reason I tell that story is sometimes you have to look at the small picture to understand the big picture. And this happened all over the country. So now we don't really even build public pools anymore. Swimming has become sort of a luxury item. I can look at almost your zip code and say, well, that kid can swim probably. Or this kid can't, because that was the sort of the explosion of country clubs, private swimming pools in neighborhoods. And one of the sort of strange things is you can't target discrimination, right? People think you can just, I'm going to go after this group, but you end up hurting more people than you probably intended. So once we stopped building public pools, not only did Black swimming rates go down, so did white swimming rates of a certain economic level. So it ended up hurting everybody across the board. And the reality is that Black people have always been swimmers, right? We come mostly from West Africa. There's a lot of, if you go to Senegal or Ghana, they're going to eat a lot of fish. That's just part of their diet, part of their staples. And if you're going to be a fisherman, you have to learn to swim. So it's well documented that Black people have been swimming for centuries. And one of the things about stereotypes is they sort of become ingrained. And I think, there are reasons Black people don't swim, but we have to make sure we don't let reasons become excuses. All right, there's a big difference between those two things.
Absolutely.
So my dad was like, yeah, there's a reason I'm not taking you to a public pool, but you're going to learn to swim. And I think that's, the history's the history, right? We can't do anything about that. We have to acknowledge it and say that,
Yes.
maybe the fact that we don't have public swimming pools as much as we used to, maybe the fact that we, fill these pools with concrete and drain them, maybe that has a little bit of effect on black swimming rates, maybe just a smidge.
Just a smidge.
But we can also sort of overcome that and look at this a little more, holistically. Now, one of the exceptions to the no public pools is Philadelphia. You talked about Jim Ellison earlier. He went to Cheney State, an historically black college in Pennsylvania, and there's some debate. I'm here in Raleigh. Is Shaw the oldest HBCU here in Raleigh or Cheney State? So I have to represent my people here. But the reality is it's Cheney State. So he swam there, and he started the Philadelphia Department of Recreation swim program in West Philadelphia. And many people don't know this. So even though that's by zip code, you'd think most people in Philadelphia, would struggle with swimming. But they don't, or they have slightly higher rates because they have access to public pools. So he started a swim team there, and you mentioned the movie with Terrence Howard. You can see it; it's a good feel-good movie. Bernie Mac is comic relief, so everybody should get it. But I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the most famous alumni of that swim team is the comedian Kevin Hart. He swam with PDR, so he is a phenomenal swimmer. You can, Google him, Kevin Hart and swimming, and you'll see that he's really, really phenomenally good at swimming. So the thing is, if we have access to pools, people end up swimming better, right? I happen to live in a neighborhood where we have a community pool in my neighborhood, and of course all the kids here can swim because the parents take them. There's somebody there that's going to teach them swimming if they need it. So getting back to your original question, that stereotype bugs me because we made some deliberate policy choices. And those things led to where we are. And I think not acknowledging that or using that as just a stereotype, well, black people can't swim, they have heavier bones or whatever.
Yes. Some of the reasoning is outright bizarre.
Yeah, it is. And I think one of the most I was a bouncer, so I've been called every name in the book. But one of the things that I think was most racist or affected me, and I totally overreacted to this, I think, to an extent. So when I got to college, in North Carolina, you had to swim to graduate college. You'd come to college, the first thing they would do is they would make you take a swim test. If you couldn't swim, they'd put you in a PE. You had to have a PE credit to graduate. So essentially they would throw you in the pool, you had to drown proof, you had to tread water, and then you had to, swim a couple of lengths. So, of course, I get there, and everybody's looking at me like, are you going to do this? I'm like, yeah, why wouldn't I? And, part of it is, as you said, I grew up in a very rural environment, and essentially I grew up around black people, right? All the black people I knew could swim. My cousins in Philadelphia, my cousins in Buffalo, my mom, my dad, my brothers, my sister, we could swim. It was just, I never really thought about that sort of stereotype. And I realized that at that moment that a lot of times black people exist as an abstraction, right? They don't really know us. So they kind of ascribe characteristics to us. Right? Yes. Somebody'd see you and go, why is he wearing a cowboy hat? Well, 25% of cowboys were black. It was a hard job. Yes. You never see that represented in popular media. So again, when you don't really know something, and one of the things I was talking to my dad, my mom, And my mom said something that stuck with me my whole life, and I'm going to tell my son. She said, "Don't you feel a little pathetic trying to explain your humanity to people?"
Yes.
And I went, "Wow." I was like, "Wow, that is an interesting way to put it." She was like, "They don't really know you." So getting back to that story, so I did my swim test. I passed, and I would go, in the mornings, and I would swim just for mental health reasons. And I had a work study job at the recreation department. So I would go there and check out equipment to people, make sure, they weren't killing each other in basketball or the weight room. And so one of my workmates comes and says, "I saw you at the swim test." I said, "Oh, okay." "Oh, all right. Great. I saw you too." What does that mean? He said, "You can swim." I was like, "Yeah." He said, "Why don't most black people swim?" And I just went off on him. I was like, "You think they call me? Hold on, I got a call. Hey, Darrin, it's black people. Can you teach us to swim?" I'm like, I said, "Black people can swim. I swim. My dad swims. My mom swims." And I'm just going completely off on them. And then I realized, I was like, "Oh, okay. That's what my parents were trying to tell me about abstraction, right? Since they don't know you, right?" And I realized, I was like, okay, so this person who's saying this is, he's from upstate New York. I'm like, I'm probably the first black person he's ever talked to. You know what I mean? Like, wow. Just statistically, when you think about it, where he grew. So in these days, we had the internet. We didn't have Google. So I looked up the stats on where he came from. And I was like, oh, okay. He's never, in his mind, he probably heard that somewhere. And then here I come, and it just sort of maybe broke his brain a little bit.
You were the first one to disprove it.
And that's, but again, I still think, and I do this sometimes, I'm guilty of it. It's not my job to explain your stereotype, why it's wrong. I mean, if I did that, I could do that all day. I've got things to do. And that's what Toni Morrison meant about that sort of, that distraction. You've got other things you need to be doing rather than explaining to him that, no, I don't have bigger bones than people. Yes, I float. Yes, I can swim. I've never been as good a swimmer as I want to be, but I'll never stop trying because that's just something, I enjoy doing. So yeah, that was I was just like going off. They don't call me. And I remember we were in the equipment room. I pick up the phone like, "Oh, it's black people. They're calling me."
The phone call you've been waiting for.
Yeah.
One thing you mentioned about having to pass a swim test for part of a PE credit. And how swimming can be interwoven into things that you may not consider. And learning how to swim can also enhance your ability to advance yourself and to get other opportunities. One of the things that I'd never even thought about before, my oldest daughter was initially a marine biology major. Mm-hmm. And she had to pass a swimming test and a scuba diving test. Because as part of that major, she was spending lots of time in the water. You're a marine biology major. But I just thought, well, they'll be looking at slides under microscopes and looking at things in test tubes. But they actually have to view things up close and gather samples and things like that. And you have to be a good swimmer for that. Yeah,
and that's just part of that particular job. And it's something that I really do think that the swimming rates, it's like 64% of black children don't swim. It's 40-something% of white children because of these lack of municipal pools and how we've sort of privatized that. But it gives you some careers you can think about. It gives you just opportunities that we don't necessarily think about. And we've made some policy decisions. I've got a friend who I was in the military with. He's now in the UK. He has his kids now. Part of their primary school curriculum is swimming. Every kid, and people will say, well, we can't do that in the USA, or that's not practical. We're the richest country on the planet. You mean tiny Great Britain can do something that we can't? I mean, I just refuse to believe that. So these were concrete policy choices that have led to where we are. And again, I hope if this podcast does nothing, I hope if it encourages one person to teach their child to swim, to take up swimming, it's been a rousing success in my opinion. If we can just do that and get them to think about that history, the stereotype is not true. And again, not our job to go out and explain that to people. It's like, here's a video of me swimming. That's not my job to do.
Right.
But I hope we can encourage people and we can think about, swimming as a survival skill, as a sport that can save your life. And that's powerful. And that's something that we should really embrace. And I, in particular, think Black people should learn to swim just because it's kind of a...
Yeah, you mentioned 64% of Black people who don't know how to swim. That's a priority. That's a group that should be prioritizing this.
And like I said, 50% of the people that end up drowning never intended to be there, to be in water. We just had a young lady in New Bern, North Carolina, it's where the Neuse and Trent rivers meet. It's a picturesque, pretty little town. She was 7. She fell in the water, but her mom luckily had been taking her to swim lessons that the YMCA was offering at low cost. So she was able to save herself. Mm-hmm. And her mom was like, if I'd have gone in there, I would have drowned. And one of the stats that really, really hits me is that if your parents don't swim, right, there's a 78% chance that you're not going to swim if your parents don't.
Well, before you go down that story, I do want to bring that up on the other side of the break. We do need to take a break right now. Okay. So just a short one. When we come back, we're going to continue talking to Darrin Evans about water safety and his experiences as a nightclub bouncer. We'll be right back.
Make 1908 House of Wine and Ale your new favorite destination between San Antonio and New Braunfels. With 15 ales on tap, more than 30 craft beers in cans and bottles, and over 70 wines, we have a selection that's perfect for both relaxing with a glass or gathering with your friends. We even have wine on tap.
That's right, we have wine on tap.
www.1908houseofwine.com.
Family and animal friendly.
Hello, it's Opportunity here. I'm calling because I have an idea for you. If you have a business, you could be reaching our engaged listeners right now instead of just listening to us talking about you reaching our engaged listeners. We can be your microphone to shout out to anyone from coast to coast who listens to this podcast on Spotify, Apple, or Google. Reach out to us at melstorytellingpodcast@gmail.com and we can craft a plan that works best for you. That's melstorytellingpodcast@gmail.com. melstorytellingpodcast@gmail.com. Now, back to real life and other fantasies.
All right, we're back with Darrin Evans to continue our conversation. So, Darrin, where can our listeners get some free or low-cost swimming lessons, and how can the adults in their lives make themselves safer around the water?
Well, here in North Carolina and nationwide, you have YMCAs that offer need-based swim lessons. So if there's a local Y, you can do that. There's a great organization if you happen to be in the Long Island area called Black People Will Swim. And she offers free swimming lessons, and she has wait lists, right? So it's an organization. You've probably seen some of the commercials. She was in a Toyota commercial for her organization. So there are lots of low cost and potentially free. So I'm part of U.S. Masters Swimming, and that's the United States Masters Swimming. It's part of USA Swimming. And April is Adult Learn to Swim Month. So if you can get on Google, find a local Masters team, you can go down in April and they'll give you instructions. They'll get you started. So there are lots of opportunities that are low cost. If there's a pool somewhere, somebody's going to teach you to swim there. Even if you're in a slightly rural area, you can find a place to learn to swim, and it's never too late to learn. You take it one step at a time, you scaffold it, and you'll get there. It's like anything else. It doesn't come. Of course, you can't do it. You've never done it before, right? I mean, it's like.
So for adults who never swam before and who may be embarrassed to admit they don't know how to swim, how do you encourage them to get out there and give it a try?
I say, listen, we've all done embarrassing things, right? I've done embarrassing things in college. It's okay to admit that you don't know how to swim. The main thing is I tell people, get started. Try to do it. Figure out what your why is. Why do you want to learn to swim? And then think about, there was an older woman I taught a couple of months ago. She was turning 70. So she grew up under Jim Crow. She said, I never had the chance to learn. She said, I've always been sort of afraid of the water. So we just started very slowly. So we're just going to get in. And part of the philosophy I was thinking was, we're going to expose you to this so that you see that this isn't as scary as I thought. It's always that perception of fear that's worse than the actual thing itself. Right. So we got her in. The first session, I just talked to her, Melvin. We just talked. So why would you learn to swim? What do you think is going to happen? What's your major fear? What can I do to sort of alleviate that? How can I help you reach this goal? She said, well, I'm going on a cruise and something may happen. And I said, okay, so so the next time we meet, we're just going to get in. That's it. Just going to get in the water. And I want you to sort of see how your body reacts. I said, we're going to try to float. She's like, Black people don't float. I was like, yes, they do. I was like, yes, they do.
And then you started with the trigger that you had earlier in your life.
Yeah. It brought me back, and I was like, okay, I can't go off on her the same way. I said, yes, they do. Okay. I said, your lungs are flotation devices. So you're going to take a deep breath. I just want you to lay back in the water. And just to see the smile on her face, like, I'm floating. I mean, that was a high for me to see that. And I'll admit it, when she swam her first lap unassisted, she swam down to the deep end and she came back. Maybe I cried a little bit.
maybe not. We don't want to do that.
I'm securing my masculinity. So maybe there were a few tears of joy. And just seeing where she came from and what she overcame. So I would encourage people to kind of face that fear and conquer it. And that translates to other things. So she's a retired teacher, so she went on the cruise. And now she's thinking, do you think I'd be too old? I talked to her a couple of weeks ago. You think I'd be too old to be a lifeguard? I was like, no, you're in great shape. I was like, that would be great. She said, I'd like to teach little kids to swim now. So she's out there now swimming laps, going up and down. Wow. And she looks like she's in her 50s. She's, I guess, 71 now. 72. So I really do think confronting that fear, it has some downstream effects and some side effects that have helped. She seems more just confident as a person. And some things she wanted to do. She was like, I've always wanted to go to Spain. That was sort of her bucket list. And now she's booked a trip to Spain.
Wow.
I'm not saying that I had anything to do with that, teaching her to swim, but I think that sort of transition in her own mind of, I can plan to do something, and if I work this process, I'll get the outcome I desire. And I think that flipped a switch in her head a little bit.
Wow.
So I'm going to take credit for that.
Might as well. And because of you, she's probably going to swim from North Carolina to Barcelona.
Yeah. She'd probably try. She might would try.
Okay, I got another quick question here for you. I know you read a lot of books on a lot of different subjects. So do you have any books that you recommend relating to this subject?
I've got some props for you.
Well, most people will hear this. They won't see it. So you'll have to do a little description.
Okay, there's a book called Undercurrents of Power, and it's by Professor Kevin Dawson at the University of California at Merced. And he talks a lot about, the subtitle is Aquatic Culture in the African Diaspora. So he talks about the aquatic culture in Africa before Africans were enslaved and brought to America. We're actually a different ethnic group, right? We're not Africans. We're actually Americans. When we got over here, we were, right. Well, we know the history. So Undercurrents of Power is one that I would recommend. There's Splash by Howard Means, which is it's 10,000 years of swimming. And he just talks about the history of swimming. He does not shy away from Jim Crow and talking about, these pools getting concrete filled in and drained, and how that has led to, some of the disparities we see. And again, swimming is becoming sort of a luxury item. So that's one I would recommend. And then there's Why We Swim by Bonnie Sue, which is just a love letter to swimming. She does get into some of the history. It's just undeniable. I mean, it's well documented. We know that swimming was something that was that excluded Black people. I mean, it did. We know the history. The main thing I'm here to do is encourage people who can't swim to go to their local Masters Club, go to their local YMCA, and find those, if you can't afford it, find those low-cost alternatives. They exist. They're there. April is Adult Learn to Swim Month. U.S. Masters has devoted a ton of resources. You can go there. You can find someone who will be willing to teach you, willing to work with you. And once you do that, you conquer that demon, you're going to say to yourself, well, gee, what else can I do that I haven't done? What else can I maybe, if I apply the same principle, right, of I work this process, and a lot of times, and I tell this to my swimmers or the people I'm trying to teach sometimes, I don't formally do this because I've got a job and other things to do, but when I have people, I sit down initially and we just talk. And then I tell them there's a process and then there's outcomes. All right? Those are two entirely different things. If you follow the process, you get the outcome. The people that focus on the outcome rather than the process, that's a fear-based response. Right? You follow this process. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to float. We're going to glide. We're going to do the process. The process, we follow the process, we're inevitably going to get the outcome. So we're not even going to look at and I tell them all the time, you hear people talk about big picture thinkers, we're going to think about the small picture, right? We're going to look at the small picture of just, we're going to do one thing at a time. And I've seen this, and I think this is the reason I like teaching people to swim so much, is you see a change in them, in their personality. Because they realize, oh, if I follow a process, right? If I have a documented process that works, I'll get an outcome I want. Well, gee, that's how you learn to play the piano. That's how you learn to,
Right.
write
Just
your first computer program. Yeah, that applies to a lot of things. And then, gee, maybe I should save money and book that ticket to Barcelona, right? Because I can do these things. So that's one of the main takeaways that I hope this podcast will have. I hope we can encourage just one person. Maybe more. More would be great, but one is sufficient.
What is the goal? Anything beyond that is great.
That's just...
We say in the South, gravy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Trust me, I love gravy. I know about gravy. I love it.
Okay. I don't want to get you on the gravy tangent.
No.
So I want to change subjects just a little bit. So I mentioned in the intro and then as a teaser just before the break that you've been a bouncer and a teacher.
Yeah.
Did you ever forget where you were and mix up the two?
They are surprisingly similar. I had a lady, I was on an interview committee, and a lady, I guess she looked up her LinkedIn. She said, well, Darrin, I see you used to be a middle school teacher. She said, what's the difference between being a middle school teacher and teaching college faculty? And I had to say, not as much as you would think. So, yeah, sometimes I would get mixed up. They're surprisingly similar in the sense that they're both about psychology and talking people down off of ledges. So as a bouncer, it's always guys, right? And it's always over some woman. I will say one truism as a bouncer, any bouncer will tell you, women are much meaner and tougher than men, right? Most guys are going to fight. They're looking at me like, Darrin, could you come separate us? I don't really want to do this. If two women fight, dial 911.
And it's about to get a lot bigger too.
Yeah, it's serious. So yeah, I would sometimes confuse where I was, but they were both, and I think this is true of all jobs. I always say, now I work in technology and I code things, but you're always working with people. Right? It's about relationships. It's about, I call it, when I was a teacher, I used to call it my get them in the car philosophy. Right? If I want you to take this trip with me, I got to get Melvin in the car with me. And how do I do that? And that's really how you do anything. So yeah, I would sometimes confuse where I was, but the skill set was exactly the same. It was convincing people to do stuff, saying, come on, man, do you really want to do that? You don't want to do that. And then I'm going to call your mom. So
you took it to the next level.
Yeah.
All right. So as we start to wind down this episode of the podcast, I want to give you a chance to talk about some other stories and some other topic, any topic that you want to talk about. I'm just going to turn the mic over to you and let you do with it whatever you want. So the floor is yours.
Oh, well, here's a bouncing story. That I hope will illustrate the people story. So one night at the bar, again, most bouncers will tell you that it really isn't about fighting. If you're going to be a bouncer, I would recommend you go get an adolescent psychology book and read it. Seriously, that would be my first tip to you. Not learn your Waza judo joint locks. Get that psychology book. So one night, a guy comes in, and I guess his girlfriend had left him, or it was over a woman somehow. So he breaks a bottle, and he comes after me. And it was, at that moment, you could have said, I'll give you $5 million, or you can hurt Darrin. He said, no, forget the money. I want to hurt this guy.
Wow.
Okay, so keep that in mind. So one day in my new job as the director of the virtual learning community, I'm working with a guy that I've been, sort of working with, and in another community college. So I'm responsible for the 58 community colleges in North Carolina and their digital accessibility. So I'm working with this guy, and I'm thinking about this story. And, he's just getting on my nerves, Melvin. He has a reputation of getting on people's nerves. I look at him and I go, David, one time as a bouncer, this guy broke a bottle. He came at me. He was physically trying to hurt me. You're getting on my nerves right now more than he did. I can't accept that in my head. I'm struggling with. I could justify him, but I'm actually more annoyed with you right now with what you're doing and what you've been doing to this team than that guy. So that was one that I had to, and I still laugh about that because David was being worse. And I think that gets that illustration of people that you're always going to have to either, try to work with them. You're going to have to try to understand them, try to put yourself in their shoes. And I have one last quick story that I'll tell before we go. So one night in college, it's late at night. My GI Bill money's not there. My friends are gone. It's a Friday night. And I look around my room. I find $1. I was like, thank you. I look under the bed. I find a nickel or a dime. I don't remember. So I'm going to walk to the store, right? I'm going to walk to the store. It's 11 o'clock at night. I'm walking to get some quick chocolate milk. And that's all that's on my head, right? I'm totally focused on. So my dorm was on a hill. I'm going to walk down. I'm going to go to the store. I'm going to get this chocolate milk, and it's just going to be sweet, chocolatey, and delicious. That's all I'm worried about at 11 o'clock. So I'm walking. I'm paying zero attention to my surroundings. I'm paying zero attention to the fact that it's 11 o'clock at night. A young co-ed walks in front of me. She starts getting faster and faster and faster. And I stop in the middle of the street, and I go, women get attacked. I never spent 1 second thinking that it's 11 o'clock at night and I shouldn't be out here. I've never in my life spent 1 second thinking about going somewhere and getting physically dominated. And then I thought, probably most women do. And it made me think that this was probably actually the most important thing I learned in college, I think. And it was, what else don't I know? And then I thought, the other voice in my head said, dummy, there's a lot you don't know. But I tried to look, that was the first time I tried to look at the world through someone else's eyes. And I realized, most privileged people don't know they're privileged because they never think about it. So when it's 11 o'clock, somebody might attack me. I'm like, okay, good luck. They're going to attack me. All right. I knew, it was just something that made me think about. So whenever somebody asks me about any kind of privilege, I always tell that story because what I want it to do is by focusing on myself in that story, I want them to think about, well, gee, I've never thought about this subject like that. So that's what I hope will work. So just thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
You don't know how much I appreciate you for being here and hearing all these stories. This is really fascinating stuff. Hopefully we can continue this conversation, probably offline, or maybe we can come back and have you come back again sometime and tell us some more stories. I'll give you more chance to expound on your love for gravy.
Yeah. Now that's going to have to be a two-parter, Melvin.
Series.
Yeah.
Part 4, Darrin and Gravy, the Southern Experience. All right, so thanks a lot, Darrin.
Thank you, Melvin. I appreciate it.
Thank you. That's it for today's edition of Real Life and Other Fantasies. Join us again next time as another great storyteller takes us on a different mental road trip to destinations unknown. Until then, remember to shine some light wherever you go. that was another edition of Real Life and Other Fantasies with your host, Melvin E. Edwards. Join us again next time for more stories about more things than you can imagine. Some of those true stories may even be about real life. See you next time.